Greetings and salutations, my comic book friends. Once again, it is your humble host, Steve, here with a few thoughts on recent comics. And in this case, recent is referring to February, as in the entire month of February. I don't want to go into any kind of detail, but it's been a rough month here, just this and that going on, and I'm going to try and race through some of the things that I felt are worth commenting on that I purchased over the course of February. I don't have everything in the pile, and we're going to try and see how quickly this goes, because we all know I can talk. So we've got count them, four issues of Amazing Spider-Man, just from the way things fell. Finished off the big Spider Slayer storyline, easy for me to say, in a rather impactful manner, and also introduced a new Venom, a new wearer of the symbiote, which was rather interesting. Also got the first the .1 book, in this case 654.1. So finally getting an idea what those are going to be like. This one, and then also there was Invincible Iron Man 500.1. The plan that they tried to explain that I was kind of hard to communicate over when Marvel first announced the .1 books was that they're both within the continuity of the current series and at the same time provide a starting point. And people go, well, why can't you just have an issue? And you could just still have these as regularly numbered issues. I don't really know why you would have to delineate them except to make them stand out, perhaps, as a here's your starting point book, like we asked. The Spider-Man 1 revolves around the new Venom, so it's tied into the current storylines, and at the same time you can read it separately as it is its own adventure. With the Iron Man book, it's Tony going to an AA meeting and basically going through his entire history as Iron Man without really explaining to them that he's Iron Man. He uses certain words, and then we see the reality of the situation when he's talking about like business problems, and then they'll show Stain International taking over and things like that. The Iron Man 1 was, I think, very effective. I really enjoyed that. There was a lot of nods back to the history. The Spider-Man 1 was good, but not nearly as timeless, perhaps, in some ways that the Iron Man 1 was. But both very enjoyable, and it did kind of intrigue me with the idea of maybe picking up some of the .1s for some of the books I haven't been reading, just to see what has been going on. I know there's a Wolverine one. I haven't bought a Wolverine solo comic in a while because they just got, Dokken took over and I just didn't care anymore. And they just stopped being the interesting reads that I expected them to be. We also have Invincible Iron Man 501, as we got new storylines cranking along there, and Tony's still trying to get that. Oh yeah, this is the we find out how he pissed off Doc Ock years ago before both of them got their powers, and Ock's back to try and give him a hard time. We got Thor, where we're still working through the World Eaters. What was this, 620? That's getting big time. Odin's got some big swinging going on there. Captain America 615. Oops, I hate when that happens. Captain America 615. We get the end of the trial, and yet apparently not completely the end of the trial. A nice twist at the end. Kind of curious to see where they're going to go with it now, but the storyline has kind of been pokey. I can't see any other way to explain it. Secret Avengers 10. Nice story. These continue to be these bombastic, big, wide budgetly, screened-looking sort of stories, and the good guys win at this one, more or less, and I don't want to go into more than that. Great art, fun stories, but I don't know, it's just a weird, lack of depth or something. I'm not quite sure what makes that one that much different. It seems like it's just all gung-ho. Avengers Academy. We finally get a face-off between those characters, Finesse and Taskmaster, who the theory is that he might be her dad, and they fight for a while, and they talk. And some other stuff's going on. There's a lot of interesting things going on in there that's feeding, actually, the storyline in the mainstream Avengers book here in issue 10, with the reasoning why this individual is going after the Infinity Gems. So there is this kind of thread woven through, and hopefully these kids will get a chance to see how their actions have impacted potentially the entire world rather nicely, or in, you know, whatever. I ramble. New Avengers 9. Flashback, a lot of flashback stuff to Nick Fury in Cuba back in like the 50s, and has a rather interesting last panel, last page that seems to hint that maybe some of the movie continuity is coming out. Yes, last panel. And the actual words, the Avengers Initiative, are uttered on a comic book page instead of in a theater. So I'm kind of curious and a little wary, because the last time I had a comic book move towards the movie continuity a little bit more, it was Spawn back in the day, and the less said about that, the better. Iron Man Legacy 11 finishes off that storyline too. I don't know if this book is done now. I lost track actually. But for flashback Iron Man stories, good fun stuff. Things work out here. We got the Illuminati fighting. Rather interesting that in general. And, oh, moving on again really quickly. It says final. But for what, like a year? We've already got the announcement now of what FF1 is going to be. It is labeled currently FF1. They actually, I think, have a picture of the suits. Yeah, here we go. And the new team member, so in memory of, so we got these black and white geometric forms. And, oh, wait, yeah, let me see. Oh, look right here. Oh, yeah, that's Spider-Man. Okay, so I'm not sure how that's going to work out. I'm curious, don't get me wrong. I'm not sure how the dynamic's going to change when you've got, you know, the three, you know, family members as they've been for so long, and then we're finally throwing Spidey in there, you know, even though he tried to sign up back in Amazing Spider-Man 1 and was told bye, and he's hung out with them over the years. The backup story in that FF issue I did really like. It's Spider-Man and Franklin hanging out, as he's kind of being the grown-up type fella to hang out with Frank a little bit and talk to him about what's happened to his, I can say it now, Uncle Johnny. And how Spidey's basically going, you know, I know where you're coming from losing an uncle. It's kind of what started all this for me. So, yeah, it was just like I said, it was a rather sweet little story. Simpsons Comics 175. This was actually, you know, I've said before, the best issues of this comic should be on the screen as animated form. And this starts out with a really screwy premise that Homer's using a giant electromagnet to draw his car home rather than spend money on gas. And he inadvertently erases all of Disco Stew's beta tapes. So he has to tell 3 stories to Disco Stew about 70s television programs. Basically, like, tell him the story of a show. And I was like, alright, fine, kind of like, what are you going to do? First story he tells is Simpson Muppet Show, essentially. And it's just goofy. It worked. And then he does Little House on the Prairie. What was the third one again? Rockford Files. But there's references to other, you know, there's the Fonz is in this shot, and Joe Namath, and Kenny Rogers of all things. So it is just this cornucopia, and then there's a implication at the end of, yes, keep doing this for other people who's, you know, he's damaged their media libraries as well. So I rather like that one. There were a couple of Vincent Price Presents issues that they seem to come in chunks occasionally, and this one did too. This one's issue 25, and this is another one of those where I mentioned these either are excellent or they're not so good at all, and this one goes more towards the excellent. We've got rather stylish art. I recognized the one character who he's supposed to be cast as. That kind of pleased me. A lot of the pictures are good. It felt like the premise. This feels like a pilot. And Vincent is playing the Raven. He's like he's like a 40s style, like, radio occult detective type guy, and you know, his old buddy from sorcery school appears to be played by Herbert Lom, which I thought was kind of slick. And the basic story, you know, they fought over the girl, and and Herbert Lomond, and now he's dying, and he's brought the Raven here to take care of his collection because otherwise it'll take over the world or something like that after he's gone. And it was just a lot of fun. It was snappily written. It was really good art. I really enjoyed that issue. It was one of those things where you could just give me a series like that and just toss away this anthology type style. I'd read that for a while until that got tedious because they ran out of stuff to do. But that was a really good issue. If you just want to pick up one, hey, is there one issue of Vincent Price Presents? Try 25. That one I really liked. And then we've got 3 different Disney comics. They've started doing, is the 70th anniversary of Disney Comics, so they've been doing the classic stories from back in the day mixed in with some more recent classics, I think is the expression that they're utilizing, and it's a good mix. I actually like the books that much extra better, a little bit more than I have, even though these have been good. So you get like an old Carl Barks story. The Mickey Mouse one was from the 50s. It was like a 3-parter. And it was pretty clever about being in South Africa and Goofy's uncle and stuff like that. There was in the Walt Disney comics, there's Donald with this crazy race car that he's trying to keep he keeps breaking it because it's too hyper powered, so he has to constantly find ways to earn money to keep fixing up the car so he can race it, and as soon as he runs it, he like runs out of gas and he balds the tires and stuff like that. And it was a classic story of with Gear who's looking for a ruby on the beach. They're all beachcombers and stuff like that. And Don Rosacar, look at that, that's great. So you've got an old school story of him like that, and the first story in the Donald Duck one is actually kind of wild because it's Donald's working for Uncle Scrooge, and Uncle Scrooge has just got this new entertainment magazine. Well, of course, it's going out of business because they go, print's a dying medium, so we need all this classic stuff is in right now. So if we can find this old comic book guy, we'd have something to kind of boost sales and everything. And turns out Donald's this huge fan of this comic that looks kind of like a duck version of Shazam, or Captain Marvel if you want, more accurately. So he tracks down, well, he doesn't have to track down, of course the Junior Woodchucks have the guy's address even though no one else knows it because that's the whole point of the Junior Woodchuck guidebook. So he's going to try and get an interview with this guy, and he keeps falling prey to all these booby traps the guy has set around his house to keep people away. Well, they're all old traps that he used in the comics, so Donald, being this big fan, gets out of every one of them, and that's how he finally gets the interview. The thing that's neat is that the comic book artist is drawn to look kind of like Carl Barks when he was older, so there's that little nod right there too. So I rather enjoyed that in amongst all the big pile of everything else. And there's stuff that I didn't enjoy as much that I'm not going to go into. It's not necessarily that it was like awful or bad or anything, because if it was awful or bad, I would be bringing it up to go, this is awful and bad. It was just stuff where it's like, oh, okay, let's see how that goes, and things that are almost done. Like the Punisher miniseries and hopefully Quarantine for Uncanny X-Men, things like that. So, that will wrap it up. I'm sure I've talked way too much as it is, and hopefully it won't be another month till I talk to you again. Till then, bye now.